You've got a killer new idea, and you're ready to pitch it. If you want to move people to invest their time, money, or belief in your vision, then you got to make them feel your story as much as they hear your story. But most startup pitches tank because they're a jumble of data points, jargon, and disconnected facts. That's frustrating for founders and maddening for investors because there's no clear narrative to follow and no emotional hook that makes them care. Now you can have a pitch that punches through the noise and lands straight in the heart of your audience. Hi, I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story. Today you're going to meet Ben Wiener. He's a Jerusalem venture capitalist and author of the brilliant new book, Fever Pitch, where he teaches the art of startup storytelling through fiction. You'll learn his H.E.A.R.T framework to craft radically differentiated, emotionally resonant pitches that actually get funded. This one's a masterclass in turning belief into backing. I am so pumped because we are in the throes of launching our Story Cycle Genie. In fact, over the past 2 weeks, we've had 20 of our beta testers putting the Genie to the test, and we've been hearing great feedback. For instance, from Candace Frazier, she said, and she is a local Phoenix area marketing consultant. She sent me a text yesterday that read, "I just did in 2 hours what would have taken me 2 weeks for a client." I mean, that's the kind of value that we are delivering with the Genie, where you can create an effective and powerful brand narrative strategy in minutes, not months, and then create content instantly, totally based on your unique, your authentic, your authoritative brand voice to differentiate you in the market so that you are connecting on a deep, visceral level with your customers to move them to action. Here are what some of our other beta testers are saying about the Story Cycle Genie.
There are aspects of what was revealed from that process that I thought was really good. And bear in mind, I'm often asked to simplify things and boil things down to their very essence. And the most meaningful thing I got from that exercise is the word at the end of this when you suggested, well, what you really could position yourself is a sage. But when I saw sage, I was thinking, okay, that might not be the kind of thing I say about myself, but I thought the insight was just fabulous. What a great word. I felt what that process did is it took apart something very complex and gave me a lot more ways to think about it.
Park, I did tell you when we met last week, I had a lot of emotions about this. The first was just, wow. There's some amazement and some pride because what the Genie picked up on were things that were very important to me that I knew about myself and that I knew that I wanted to convey. And in addition, brought this incredible insight to me, very specific words that I really wasn't emphasizing. I mean, probably the biggest one of all is that I'm a consultant. I do all kinds of leadership development, but I was not thinking about Rails and the Rails Talk methodology being at the core of everything I do. How did I miss that? The Genie pulled that up. And when I first read it, I thought, how come I wasn't thinking like that?
That was amazing. And I really loved that you came on the show and walked me through that because that was, well, first of all, easier for me to process than reading 7 pages. But it was also very enlightening, right? Because you were talking me through each step, the output that we got from your system, what that meant, and how to apply it. The one thing I kept thinking and saying repeatedly was, wow, that is spot on. It was really, really good.
If you would like to take advantage of our soft launch and all of the bonuses and the discount off the introductory price on the Story Cycle Genie, which is coming on or about July 7th, then register now. Only those who register at businessofstory.com/storycycle Genie will be eligible for the soft launch discounts and bonuses. I hope you'll come and join us because I know you are going to love it. And in fact, we sent Ben's brand through the Story Cycle Genie before our conversation, sent him his results, and he's going to share with you how blown away he was. And this is coming from a guy who sees a lot of technology, a guy who is a very, very successful venture capitalist in Jerusalem. And he's going to share with you how he uses story and how you can use the Story Cycle Genie to be able to sell your ideas, whether it is a SaaS startup, a tech startup, maybe it's an initiative internally in your organization when you have to really connect deeply with an audience. Ben has his H.E.A.R.T framework. So let's get to the show right now with Ben Wiener. Good evening, Ben. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm a big fan of your work and glad to be on the show.
Well, thank you. It's actually morning here in Arizona, but I know it's evening there in Jerusalem. So it's just absolutely great to have you. I love bringing in story artists from around the world. So I'm glad you reached out about your new book, and I'm really pumped about talking about it today.
Thanks for having me. I can't think of a better titled podcast to talk about this topic. So looking forward.
Well, I love your approach to fever pitch in that you share your business and your startup wisdom through, I guess, a fictional tale. I don't know how much is fact and how much is fiction. What's inspired by actual events, whether they happened or not?
There's very little actual events. There's only one character in the whole book who's loosely based on somebody I met once, and he's a very pivotal character in the book. But the rest is completely made up, and it's designed to be a fable, like a teaching tool to teach the fundamental principles of the ideal startup pitch.
Yeah, I love it. Go Giver and that whole Go Giver series of books did the same thing about leadership and business, and very, very effective. So I think what you're doing with Fever Pitch is similar. So to give our audience just a little bit of background on you very quickly, I, of course, ran your brand, Ben Wiener, through the Story Cycle Genie, sent it to you. This is how I do my due diligence these days on all the guests. And let me just read the brand assessment of which the Genie pulled from your website and content. And it reads, Ben Wiener positions himself as a multifaceted professional who combines venture capital expertise with intellectual curiosity and athletic discipline. I'm going to dig a little deeper on that with you in a second. You present yourself as a voracious reader who believes that reading up to 100 books annually has made you a better investor, writer, and person. You're a 10-time marathoner living in Jerusalem, Israel, which suggests both physical and mental endurance. Jumpspeed Ventures positions itself as a highly selective early-stage VC fund focused exclusively on category-defining technology startups within the Jerusalem startup ecosystem. Your investment criteria are clearly articulated around 5 key elements: pain, big dollar value current pain versus nice-to-have opportunities; paucity, inadequate current solutions; paradigm shift, 10x better solutions; people, hacker plus hustler teams; and passion, driven by making a difference rather than just profit. You appear to differentiate yourself from typical VCs by emphasizing that there's no we in VC, suggesting a more humble, realistic approach to your role with portfolio companies. Your brand combines serious investment expertise with intellectual depth, evidenced by your extensive reading and authentic connection to the Jerusalem startup ecosystem. How accurate is that?
I got to tell you, Parker, I was blown away by that report. And I think I kept questioning you, like, are you sure that this was generated automatically? It was remarkably insightful about how I try to position myself. And it even, I think, surfaced a couple things that I wouldn't have expected to show up in a report like that. So just very, almost goosebumpy, scary. And I couldn't, I couldn't promote it more to people listening. Like, you got to try this thing out. It's really spooky good.
Spooky, scary, but in all the best ways, I'm hoping you're saying. But it's great timing for me to have you here because we are in the startup mode too. And so your book came out as perfect timing. What would any business person, whether they're in a startup mode, actually launching, a tech company or whatever, or maybe they're just launching a new initiative internally inside of a large enterprise, what are they going to learn from you and your book, Fever Pitch?
The book is just sort of one of the outputs to work that I've done over the last couple of years to try to figure out if there was an ultimate optimal way to present new innovative ideas that cause people to take action, like give you money or decide on a new path for your company. And one of the things that I produced was a framework for pitching a new idea called the H.E.A.R.T, the Heart framework for pitching. And then along the way, as I developed that framework, I had this idea of a founder who couldn't pitch a startup to save his life until he actually needed to pitch his startup to save his actual life. And what would that look like? Could I send this like fictional person on a journey to discover and teach what I had believed that I had uncovered in a more fun, entertaining way? So I could have just written the HEART framework up in a 2,000 word blog post that nobody would have read. And instead I wrote a 270-page fictional novel to teach the same thing. So you have to be a little bit crazy to do what I did, but it was just a labor of love. It was a lot of fun. And I thought it would be a more enlightening, but also entertaining way or alternative way to teach what I was trying to teach. You don't have to read the book to get the gospel truth of the H.E.A.R.T framework. You can also just look it up on the website and, access the playbook and download worksheets to do it. But for those that want to enjoy a good story and learn it, plus a whole lot of other lessons about innovation and startup land and the journey of a founder, the book is a fun way to explore and uncover some of those principles and what I believe are truths about the journey.
Can you give us sort of the overarching story framework or story narrative here in the book that people will read about?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of there have been some books about startup founders, like fictional novels about startups that I feel are very cartoonish. Like I have a lot of respect for the founder's journey, and it's very complicated and tense. So I wanted to try to capture, I mean, every startup is different, but I wanted to try to capture what it was like for me as a founder back in the day and what it's like for many of the founders I work with, like a realistic view into this well-meaning founder who's just got, he's got a mistaken view of how to present his startup to, particularly to investors. He's so passionate and he's so committed and he's so convinced that what he has is amazing. And it may be, it turns out that it really is, but he's so caught up in that he's not able to get into the head of the people that he's trying to tell it to and explain it to them in the way that they want to hear it. And again, this is like the outgrowth of research that I've done into, my actual work and other VCs who have, the way to set up the reason for writing the book or the reason for doing this research was, and you'll tell me if you recognize this framework. I would say it as follows. The startup pitch or the need for capital is a gating factor for a startup entrepreneur. And investors,
I see where you're going with this.
See where I'm going. And investors tell us that the pitch deck, the pitch itself, over 90% of investors tell us that is an essential part of their analysis. But the shocking statistic is that over 82% of venture capitalists say that the pitch deck on average is poorly organized. So 4 out of 5 times, the pitches that they're receiving are like a song that's being sung off key. And that could be very frustrating and distracting to an investor when this is happening to you like 3 or 4 times a day or a week, when the song that's being sung to you is being sung over and over again out of tune. And so therefore, I embarked on this journey of research to try to figure out, like, why is this still a problem in 2022, 2023, 2025? Why are founders just not getting this right? And once I figured out where the disconnect was, I developed this 5-part framework to try to upgrade a typical pitch, and then embedded that into this crazy story of a protagonist who has this decent idea, but it's not working, and his whole life starts falling apart. And it's fun. The mafia gets involved, and there's a lot of music, and it's almost like this extreme version of craziness, and you're sort of yelling at him in the book saying, dude, just get the story straight and you can get yourself out of this mess. And of course, it takes quite a while for him. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but when he finally discovers the framework in his dark night of the soul, when he's, unfortunately thrown into jail, the question is he going to be able to get out and get out in time and get to, salvation when everyone's trying to kill him? It's just a fun way to highlight the tension in an extreme case of a guy who really needs to get his pitch straight. And again, part of this, the book itself, I wasn't thrown in jail and my life wasn't falling apart, but I went through that kind of journey as I started to do my entrepreneurial activities. I was rejected often by investors.
What
And
was your startup idea?
Well, I had many startups, but the one that really worked is the one that I manage today, which happens to be a venture capital fund. When I started the fund 12 years ago, I mean, but just factually, not to over glamorize it or over dramatize it, but factually, I was broke. I was unemployed. I had no track record as an investor. I had a pretty interesting, very counterintuitive idea for a new venture capital fund in my city that was very provocative and contrarian. And I thought people would just trust me as a smart guy and would give me some money. And I was 0 for 27 pretty quickly with investors and realized, oh, shoot, my pitch is not working. And it culminated in a coffee shop where I took out a wealthy individual. And he literally stood up in the coffee shop in the middle of my pitch, called timeout like in a basketball game, stood up, literally looked down at me from the tip of his nose and said, Ben, this is the most ridiculous pitch I've ever heard. This will never work. We're not going to invest in you. Nobody's going to invest in you. Go get a job. And he walked out of the coffee shop. And I'm just sitting there thinking, oh, shoot, this is not working. And thankfully, instead of just being frustrated and angry and upset, I started to think about, why was I over 27? I really believed in what I was doing. I believed that there was an investment opportunity, but something was wrong with my pitch. And so I went back to the drawing board, reconfigured my pitch. Nothing had changed. My thesis hadn't changed. My abilities hadn't changed. I hadn't suddenly gotten better looking or funnier. I just reordered the information and presented it in a new way that matched the way the investors' brain were working. And then I was able to raise money and get my venture capital fund off the ground. And ironically, that initial fund that nobody wanted to invest in became one of the top 10% returning funds in its vintage in the world for 2013, returned millions and millions of dollars of cash to investors who luckily were kind enough to get me started. And I became a #1 best-selling author on Amazon with a book about startup pitching, when initially I'd started off over 27 with my stupid pitch. So clearly there was a journey involved for me. I wasn't thrown in jail. I wasn't chased by the mafia, but I went through a pretty tumultuous journey to try to rejigger my pitch from really, really striking out to, resonating with investors. And that caused me to start to research, okay, what was wrong with my first pitch? What was better about my second pitch? And what could I teach other founders once I started to research and analyze, like, what really makes a winning pitch? What could I do to teach that to the founders that I work with, to other founders out there, and sort of pay it forward, pay it back to.
So, Ben, what I'm hearing is that you were broke. You didn't want to go get a job. You had what others thought was a harebrained idea, but you believed in it in a very disruptive way to pull together a group of VCs, some venture capital. And then you went in and you relied solely on your story in that pitch, and your story was off tune. It was, 27, thank you, but no thank you, go get a regular job. At some point, you must have thought, maybe they're right. Maybe I should go get a job.
I never thought that. I was really, the more I dug into the specific opportunity that I had found, the more I saw that it was real. And I wasn't being able to communicate that clearly to the people who I needed to communicate it to. So I never really doubted the opportunity. I just doubted myself. I doubted, wait, maybe I'm just not good at explaining this. And I need to rethink how I'm explaining it so that people will see what I see. And thankfully that worked.
Okay, well, let's go through it. And could you do an A/B test for us? Could you tell us what your first story was roughly? And then where are all the cracks and fissures and holes in it and how you fixed it? And then we'll dive deeper into your H.E.A.R.T framework.
I'll give you some major ones. I can't possibly analyze how terrible the whole thing was, but it was very classic. Like today, when somebody bumps into you in an elevator and you're working on a new thing, 10 out of 10 times they will ask you, "Oh, hey, Park, nice to meet you. So what do you do? What does your company do?" And so you answer what your company does and how it does it. I say that's wrong. And that's the way I began. Like, "Oh, what's your venture capital fund idea?" "Oh, my venture capital fund, does this and this and this, and this is, some examples." What the investor really wants to know, and I'm drawing on a very famous piece of work by Simon Sinek, one of the most famous TED Talks ever, his famous book, Start With Why. When somebody asks you what you do, you need to start with why. You don't answer what you do. You say, "I believe at such and such company, we believe that." There has to be a belief statement in the beginning. There has to be, and preferably a little bit provocative or controversial. It's even cooler when it's something that you believe, that you've seen in the future, that you're bringing back to the present, that other people don't yet believe. The greatest ideas, the greatest ideas are the non-consensus ideas that turn out to be right. And deep down, an investor or somebody that wants to do something new is actually yearning or looking for that new thing that you've discovered that they don't know about or that they don't fully appreciate. So let's start with that. Let's start with "I believe" or "we believe," or you may not realize that, or you may not be aware that something that shows that you believe in something, and that's what's motivating you to do what you do. And then you get into later on, you get into what you do and how you do it, etc. So I try to deflect that question into a different answer. And I think that's really what investors are searching for. So I think I was doing a lot of that. When I was meeting with investors, you shoot them with a fire hose of all the important information that you want to give them. But that's not really what they're looking for. They want to start at an earlier point. Your train has already left the station and they're still back at the station saying, "Well, why? Why do we need this? Like, why does the world need another venture capital fund in my case? Why does the world need another tech startup in anybody else's case? Like, I'm not even sure we need this. I'm not even sure this is worth the time and effort to do. So let's start with why." That's the H of the H.E.A.R.T, the hypothesis or the start with why. I'm already taking you into the framework, but that's one example of a common, I believe, mistake or misstep, like right out of the gate. What do you do? You answer with what you do. No, no, no. What do you do? You answer with why you do it, then get back to what you do. It's more important to start with why. That was just one example. I think there were other mistakes that I made, not focusing on how radically different my solution is or what the current alternatives were and why they were terrible. Just what the need was there's multiple steps you need to set up before you get into what you do to set up the drama or the mystery or the tension that causes the person you're talking to want what you're looking for. I always say,
Hmm.
like, sort of like a movie trailer. A movie trailer is 2 minutes long. And in an action movie trailer, it would be ridiculous to watch Tom Cruise or James Bond like run around for a minute and a half and then only at like a minute and a half introduce the villain. We want to see the villain like early and understand what the stakes are, like what's at stake, and then see the hero chase the villain for the next minute and a half to get us interested.
Yeah, well,
And
in your
in a
book,
pitch,
in Fever Pitch, you were talking about the Dark Night of the Soul and that sort of thing. Did you follow Blake Snyder's 15 Beats to Story? Is that what pulled kind
yeah,
of the framework of the overall book together?
the book is right here. It's on my shelf.
Save the Cat?
Yeah, and this is one of the most important books that I read in my journey, and it was so remarkable. We could talk about Save the Cat for a while, but I believe that in many movies, especially kids movies, once this book came out, I think that there are movies where, like, I could just imagine the theater where there's like screenwriters in the theater, and at certain points in the movie they just fall over laughing, and the rest of the theater is like wondering what's so funny, because there are certain movies where you can see that the screenwriters were all sitting with this book, Save the Cat, and they were putting in jokes that are about screenwriting. For example, Save the Cat is Blake Snyder writes that at the early point in the hero movie, the hero should self-identify by doing something like slightly heroic, like saving a cat. In the first Incredibles movie, if you remember, Mr. Incredible is like late for the wedding, and he's chasing the bad guys, and they keep delaying him to get to his wedding. And suddenly, this old woman says, "Mr. Incredible," and the cat's up in the tree, and he literally saves the cat. I'm
Yeah.
convinced that that's a save the cat joke for other screenwriters to laugh at that nobody else really got because it was just an embedded inside joke. So
Yeah.
those beats, those narrative arcs that Joseph Campbell, I know you've quoted Joseph Campbell in your prior podcast. I heard a couple of those those narrative arcs were out there for anyone to learn from. I just didn't think that anybody had pulled them into the startup world. And that's what I did over the last couple of years. I researched like mythology and and psychology and screenwriting and novel writing. And they all led me to the same first principles, like fundamental building blocks of a story, which is frankly the way that we've evolved as humans to process new information. Like back in the campfire when we were cavemen, the successful people were telling stories in a certain way. And our brains evolved to expect and to respond to those stories in that structure. And the problem is that 82% of venture capitalists are telling us that the founders that they're meeting are not telling them the story in that structure. They're misstructured. They're structured out of
Mm-hmm.
order, and they're getting very
Mm-hmm.
frustrated. So I'm coming in and saying, okay, I think all I'm doing is pulling these narrative arcs from other genres like movie writing and book writing and mythology, and I'm pulling it into our world of innovation and business and saying, let's just use those narrative arcs. What does that narrative arc look like in a startup pitch? What does that narrative arc look like when you're pitching a new project in your company? It's these 5 principles that are the same kind of beats that Blake Snyder was talking about, that Joseph Campbell was talking about. In these other areas, let's hit those beats in a startup pitch or in a new business idea pitch, because that's the way the human brain is working. That's the way the listener that you're talking to wants to digest the story, because he or she is basically still a caveman back around the campfire. And that's the way we want to process these
Mm.
stories. I think
Yeah.
what really shocked me was a couple years ago when I was still pitching and striking out, somebody said to me more than once, actually, they would say no, and they would say, but you have a great story. And I would say, what are you talking about? Like in my head, I was thinking, I'm not telling a story. I'm presenting a business idea. I'm not telling a story. And then you realize, no, it is a story. It's always a story. When we're trying to present new information to somebody, we don't realize it, but we're telling them a story. And therefore, that story must match the structure of storytelling. Let's do that for new business ideas. And that's all I've tried to do with the H.E.A.R.T framework and with the book.
Yep. And you and I are in lockstep because that's what I've done with business, branding, marketing, sales, sustainability for the last 20 years. Way back when I went to Robert McKee's legendary story conference, 3.5 days of him in a cold, dark Sheraton LAX ballroom, and he just goes on. And he said so many words of just pearls. And again, he was talking to screenwriters, but I was there as a marketer because I wanted to know what did Hollywood know and screenwriters know. And he said, we use stories to make meaning out of the madness of being human beings. And the story is the one learning tool, or the tool that enables us to understand and appreciate the bigger picture. And so when you are using story as you do with startups and in your new book and so forth, you're simply guiding people on how to communicate to that limbic brain in the way it wants to receive information. You use the ABT beautifully early on, and the statement of agreement, but here's the problem I'm going to be solving for, therefore here's the way forward. And it sounds like in the hypothesis, when you're talking about the why, is that it's a perfect spot for an ABT, because with the ABT, what we're always trying to do is to arouse and fulfill. Arouse that curiosity, arouse that expectation, arouse that question. Well, I didn't know that was a problem. Tell me more. And then fulfill it with the answer to that question and how you are going to solve a problem. Because as legendary Silicon Valley marketer Christopher Lochhead says, nobody buys a solution unless they have a frickin' problem. And that's essentially what you're talking about. So how does your heart, and I'd like to walk through all 5 steps of it, because I really want to hear how you use story frameworks, be it the hero's journey or Blake Snyder's arc or the Pixar way, if you will. That's our awfully familiar one or favorite one in this day and age. How did you use those to create your H.E.A.R.T framework?
Yeah, I wanted to try to simplify it as much as possible without making it simplistic. So I really tried to boil it down to its component parts. So what I came out with was 5. And then I realized, oh wow, they spell out like E-A-R-T. I just need to kind of wedge the first one. The first one really should have been a W because it's Y, but okay, I created H hypothesis to make it spell out heart. So and quickly, it's start with why. What's our hypothesis? And that first sentence should be I believe, we believe. There should be the word belief should be in that sentence. If you watch the Simon Sinek TED Talk, he says the word believe or belief over 33 times. So that belief connection is very important, or at least a belief challenge. Like I'm not sure that the investor believes yet what I'm about to say, but at least I'm indicating that I believe something, and he's or she has to spend the next 20 minutes trying to figure out if they believe what I believe. But at least I've thrown down the gauntlet. So that's H, hypothesis, start with Y, belief statement. E, enormous stakes. There's a lot at stake. Our hero is facing a very serious villain. This is, human life, big dollars. There's a lot at stake in what I believe. I believe that there's a huge problem or that there's a huge opportunity. Size matters to get people excited or upset. A is before we even introduce our hero, we want to know what the alternatives are. What's the current state of play and why is it screwed up? So A is alternatives are terrible or alternatives are grossly inadequate. So we believe that there's something that's messed up or a big opportunity. There's a lot at stake. The alternatives are terrible. The status quo is not acceptable. And then only the fourth out of five, our hero comes riding in on a white horse, and that's the R. Our hero is a radically differentiated solution. Revolutionary. It's just totally different. It's not better. It's not optimized. It's not improved. It's just a radically new way of addressing, because that's what it's going to take to change people's behavior. People are used to the status quo. They like to kind of sit on the couch and keep doing what they do. And many venture capitalists have said that if your solution is better, but there are solutions that are good enough, even if we all agree that your solution is better, it might not be good enough for us to invest. It might not be good enough for customers to change their behavior. And we can think of all sorts of examples in our life where we could see something that might be a little bit better, but we're not going to risk our job or risk our, downloading a new app or doing something different unless we're pretty convinced that the new thing is going to really be different and change our experience. And then finally, the T is not just team, but specifically the traits and skills of the team. Does this band of fools, does this band of bozos have the unique credibility and ability to do this crazy thing? Like, do they have the ability to design it, build it, and sell it if it's a startup? So does the team have the credibility and ability, the personas, the traits, the roles that are required to run off into the jungle and accomplish this mission? So I think a lot of pitches that I hear, I hear these pitches, dozens a week. It's remarkable to me. I don't mean to put down founders. I have a lot of deep respect for founders. I was a founder once, and I think I too made this mistake. I think in many of my early pitches, not only did I not really hit those five things, I think there are pitches that I hear that don't have any of those five things. And what that means is that the person that's being pitched to is retranslating as the pitcher is pitching them on the new thing. There's like this dissonance or a frequency disruption. There's like a buzzing in their head because they're trying to reconnect into their neurons or into their caveman mind how this fits into a narrative arc that they're expecting. So they're retranslating, and in that retranslation, a lot of stuff gets dropped. There's a lot of frustration. They may miss the point of what the pitcher is trying to say, and it's unfortunate. I think in the graveyard of failed startups, there's a whole section of startups that you and I never heard of that had amazing ideas and great teams, but they just couldn't tell the story straight, and they didn't get funded, or they didn't get funded by the right investor. And unfortunately, they never brought their amazing thing into the world. And I want to try to fix that. I want to try to give founders, empower them with an upgrade to their pitch and give them a better chance of securing the necessary funding that they need. I can't guarantee that the venture is going to be funded, but I can guarantee that the odds are going to be better, and they're going to have a better chance of connecting with the investor that they want. And they're going to feel more comfortable and more empowered with the pitch because it's more in control. It flows more smoothly. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Can I bounce your heart framework using our story cycle genie, since I've just learned about it through you, and how I would tell the story, because we are in launch phase. We're not looking for funding at this point. We are self-funded, but we certainly are looking to get people to invest in the genie. Can I run through it real quick with you and you can coach me so everyone can hear it?
Go ahead.
And then all of you listening out there, just apply this same thing to your company, because I think what Ben is saying here is you don't have to be a startup. You could be a small to mid-sized company that you're looking to really exponentially grow your revenue, and you got to think a bit like a startup like that, and you got to tell your story a little bit differently to people out there in order for them to invest in you. So, okay, Ben, here we go. Number one, the hypothesis. I believe that in working for my 40 years in the business, I believe that small to mid-sized businesses remain that way primarily because they don't know how to tell their story. In fact, in America, only 1% of businesses actually do over $10 million in revenue. The other 99% are toiling below that 10%, primarily, as I believe, because, and as I have seen, they simply don't know how to tell a clear, concise, and compelling brand story that differentiates them in the market and pulls people in. The stakes are enormous because branding is not democratized. You either get it, everyone suffers from the dilemma that we've all heard. You can have it fast, you can have it cheap, you can have it good. Pick two or the three. In fact, we call that the trilemma: fast, cheap, or good. And so a lot of these small to medium-sized businesses just suffer because they don't ever pull it together. Fast means they haven't really given the attention it needs to be strategic. Cheap means it's probably going to look, sound, and feel cheap and be off strategy. And good is, well, just good. The alternatives are grossly inadequate because most companies can't afford the money and or take the time to do branding right. A lot of agencies price themselves out, and the people inside that company, I believe, are so busy trying to make their business run and grow, they simply don't have time to build that brand story. But now there's a radical, revolutionary way to do it, and that is using our story cycle genie. It is built on the story cycle system, which I perfected coming out of Hollywood 20 years ago, and it has grown brands by as much as 200%. Or I'm sorry, actually 600%. Now people can use the genie to craft a lucrative brand story strategy in minutes, not months, create immediate content based off of their unique, authoritative voice, and have it be not good, but brilliant. So, how did we pull this all together? There's three of us. I am the lead with the story cycle system. Sean Schroeder, who used the story cycle system back in 2017 to rebrand his digital firm, Blue River in Sacramento, and a large content management SaaS platform they created called H.E.A.R.T, did that. They grew exponentially, and they sold both products, both the agency and H.E.A.R.T. And he came to me and said, your system is fantastic. It just is hard and takes time. Let's create an AI-powered platform out of it so that we could democratize branding and people can do it in minutes and not months. And then finally, the third person on our team is Matt Levine. He is the hardcore developer that built H.E.A.R.T first and foremost, and now our platform completely resides on a CMS called Brightsea. So now people can unlock or uncork their brand genius, let it out of the bottle with the story cycle genie. Now I totally blew that, Ben. I was all over the place, but I was just trying to go down your 5-hit framework there.
I thought for a first attempt that was pretty good. I actually, was trying to pay attention closely, and I think you only mentioned the AI in the team part, and I don't recall if you mentioned that as part of the radical differentiation. I think what the story cycle genie really does is that in the flick of a switch, like in 5 minutes, it's going to do this comprehensive, like, lifetime audit of everything you've ever published and spit out this automated report that would take human beings. Like, I can't even imagine how much it would cost to get a team of branding specialists to replicate the kind of report that you generated for me.
50,000 plus.
Yeah, in 5 minutes. And
Yeah.
I think that's part of the pitch. The pitch is the alternatives are, hiring a brand, like you said, hiring a branding firm will cost you tens of thousands of dollars. We can turn this out in AI that is incredibly accurate in 5 minutes. And that's never been able to be done before. And it takes a lot of know-how that we've brought to the table to put into that algorithm over 40 years of experience, blah, 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 to make that AI robust and to make it accurate and not hallucinate. I think you pretty much nailed it, and it's pretty good for a first try. I am so used to the H.E.A.R.T framework that I do it on other people, like, to be annoying. So people will pitch me,
Okay.
and I'll say, you mind if I repitch it to you? And it's wild. It's like a mentalist, experiment where
Can you do that for me? Can you repitch what you just heard? And you've
I,
already experienced it. Can I put you on the spot and repitch it to me?
yeah, I would do it. I'll do it more concisely. I would say,
Yeah.
hi, I'm Park. I believe that that branding is broken. I love the really challenging statement. Like whatever. I'm just riffing. But I would
Hmm.
say I believe that branding is broken for small businesses. They just aren't. It's completely inaccessible. They don't have the ability to do anything other than like day to day run their businesses. It's just out of the realm of possibility for them to even contemplate some sort of fancy branding exercise. They're just trying to survive, arguably, right? There's a lot at stake because, as you said, the vast majority of small businesses in the United States are way below is single digit millions if they're lucky. They're just trying to live day to day, and they could, in theory, we believe they could be bigger. The alternatives for branding are terrible, like hiring a branding firm, impossible. It's just not affordable for a small business. It's just out of the question. So there's just no way for them to access world class branding expertise if you're running like a $5 million home goods store in Wichita. There's just no there's no alternative. There's no solution to this until in comes our hero on white horse. We have developed this AI powered, never been done before, deeply sophisticated algorithm that in literally 5 to 10 minutes can spit out a detailed, comprehensive branding report with recommendations for your business based on the body of content that you've put out over your lifetime, and give you a sophisticated, world-class professional branding report with the click of a button harnessing the power of AI and our decades of in the field experience. My team and I, as you said, have Hollywood
Hmm.
experience and branding experience and AI experience. Game over, drop the mic, where do I sign?
And the one thing that I would underscore with that is it doesn't just give you the report, but you can now go in and refine everything in there. So it's going to validate what you're already doing well. It's going to reveal gaps and highlight, missed opportunities that you can fix immediately. And it's going to inspire you with fresh ways to tell your story. Once you get that foundation down and locked into the genie, then you can build every kind of content off of your unique and authoritative story.
Yeah, and by the way, listen to how each of us did that. We each did that in probably less than 2 minutes. And I think anybody listening would have a pretty good sense, either listening to me or you, or both of us, pretty good sense, even not knowing anything about it before, pretty good sense of the whole story of who we are, what this is trying to do. I mean, they might have certain follow-up questions, but you basically got the whole gist of it with those 5 points. And that's the idea of the H.E.A.R.T. Like, that is the pitch. It's not just the foundational elements of the pitch. It is the elevator pitch. And I would argue that if somebody was stuck literally in an elevator with an investor, all they would need to do is hit the H.E.A.R.T. elements, and that in person listening would have a very, very solid sense of the whole story and be either interested or not interested in following up to take action. That's
I
the
think
goal.
it's fascinating. In your book, Fever Pitch, you obviously must roll out the H.E.A.R.T program. And is it the H.E.A.R.T framework that saves this guy's ass?
Well, I don't want to give away the ending, but he does. There's a lot of music in the book. I mean, I am a crazy Rush fan. You don't need to be a Rush fan to
I
appreciate the book.
noticed that in the prologue.
Yeah, Rush
Hmm.
is a divisive band. It would have been easier. Like somebody said, why don't you make him like a Led Zeppelin fan? I'm like, that's easy. That's a layup. Everybody likes Led Zeppelin. Rush is a divisive band. So I wanted to highlight how this guy, like love him or hate him, he's committed to something. And Rush plays a very subliminal part throughout the book. You don't need to like Rush. You don't even need to notice all the Rush references. Every chapter of the book is a Rush song title. They matched like what the action in the book. But most importantly, when he's thrown into jail erroneously deep into the book, the warden of the jail leaves the radio playing. And in his dark night of the soul, locked in jail with the mafia chasing him and his wife has left him and like a lot of things are going wrong, he hears a bunch of songs, and the songs kind of connect to what's going on in his head, or maybe cause what's going on in his head. And when he hears Closer to the Heart, H.E.A.R.T, that's when like the light bulb goes on. And that's where we introduce the H.E.A.R.T framework. It like hits him that he's scribbled a bunch of things on the jail cell wall and they kind of spell out H.E.A.R.T. That was my kind of, mischievous way of introducing the H.E.A.R.T framework. But again, He's locked in jail. There's people chasing him, trying to kill him. There's no clear, it's not obvious that he's going to get out and get to the finish line. And there's some really good, I mean, I can't pitch my own book, but there's some fun twists even along the way before we get to the end, even up to the last couple pages. There's some trickery involved in this book, which made it just more fun to write. And I think more fun for the people that read it. Even if they had a sense of what was possibly going to happen at the end, you don't really get what's going to happen until it happens.
Ben, do I have this right that Fever Pitch has hit #1 on Amazon in multiple categories? And if so, why do you think that is?
I have a lot of relatives. No, I'm joking. I know how many books sold, and it exceeds the number of relatives that I have in my family. It was very cool. The book launch went very well. Within a couple of days, the book was a top #1 new release in its categories on Amazon. And then a couple of days later, it actually hit #1 bestseller in its categories, and it held that position for a couple of days. That was an incredible thrill of a lifetime for me. You can't hold those things for too long. There are some crazy, ridiculous, like famous books that I have on my shelf. I have like 10 of the books that I passed are on my shelf behind me that were written by like famous people. So that was like a thrill to see my book like passing them temporarily up on the bestseller list. But of course, things settle back down, but it's still ranking as a bestseller. There's definitely people that are getting it or getting exposed to it that I don't know. And that was the goal. The goal was to get it out there and to be helpful to founders. I'm not looking to be rich and famous. I'm doing well as a venture capitalist. Thank God. The writing is a fun side project for me to try to be helpful and give back. I'm donating proceeds. All the proceeds from this book are being donated to charity. This is about me giving back and paying it forward. And what's much, much more important to me than a bestseller is if founders will write to me now or in the future and say, oh my gosh, I used the H.E.A.R.T framework and it helped me raise money from the venture capitalist or investor that I wanted. It helped me feel more empowered in my pitch. If I get that kind of feedback from people, which will take time, that will be the most meaningful thing. And I've already gotten some of those. The framework is being taught by people that I know at Harvard Business School, at Johns Hopkins, at business schools in Israel. I have one venture capitalist friend who told me that he switched it. He was being pitched over the phone by a founder and said to him, time out, this pitch is terrible. Can I redo it for you using Ben Wiener's H.E.A.R.T? And he said the founder was like blown away that the pitch was even better than anything that he had ever tried to do for his own startup. So when I get feedback like that, it's very meaningful. There is a group at Hopkins that turned it into an AI. So they upload pitches into their AI and it spits it back as an H.E.A.R.T pitch. I love them. I don't love that. That's not what I intended. I don't want AI to do the pitch. I want to extract the pitch from the founder. So the way that, Michelangelo famously said, I don't know if it's true, but he allegedly said, David was in the marble and all I did was carve away everything that wasn't David. It's a beautiful metaphor, even if it's not true. That's what I'm trying to do with founders. I'm trying to say, you've got this amazing idea. It's in your head. You're just not explaining it as clearly as you could. Use this framework to get your David out of the marble. Use it to get it out of you. And in fact, in addition to the book, I've published a totally free playbook on the web. You can go and get it at feverpitchbook.com. You can buy the book or you can take a right turn and go into the playbook. At the end of the playbook, we've even published a form, like a worksheet or a generator, where you answer a bunch of questions and it spits out your H.E.A.R.T elevator pitch. And that is your pitch. Those are the fundamental framework pieces of your pitch. And it's for anybody to use. You can access it for free. And I'm more than happy for people to try it out and use it. And you can just keep inputting it until you get something that you like. It's very tough because it's character constrained. You can't write a lot. That's the whole point. We vomit all these giant globs of information into these pitches. The investors don't want to read that stuff. They want the concise, succinct, like refined David out of that big chunk of marble. And that's what the tools that I'm trying to give founders to enable them to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, you said Hopkins was built an AI that used it, and you were saying that that's not quite what you had intended. However, I think AI can be really, really effective. I mean, I've got my ABT framework as specific to business in ChatGPT, and it does it very well. And it's just a great starting point. It's not the end all. I still have to go in and tweak it. So, for all of you listening out there, as you do Ben's H.E.A.R.T framework, really understand it first and foremost. Then, if you are going to use AI to help you with it, you will be better off because you as a humanoid will really understand the nuances and what makes the H.E.A.R.T framework work. ChatGPT tends to take more of a glancing blow at it, giving you the basics, but then you've got to bring yourself to it.
Yeah, and I want to be careful about what I say about AI, because when the AI actually does take over and harvest our organs and kill us, I want them to say, not to say, hey, that's Ben Wiener. He said really bad things about AI. Let's get his kidneys. So I do want to be respectful to AI and our AI overlords before they take over. But like you said, AI should be used as a tool, but not as a crutch. And if you're starting a startup, I really want I want this information to come out of you first, and not to rely on AI to give you like the crux of your entire pitch. You got to have it, in your head and be able to whip it out when you're in an elevator or at a conference or bumping into somebody at a barbecue. Like, it should be something that is inside the founder and not in their chat GPT.
Yeah. In your unique value proposition from the Story Cycle Genie, it says disciplined early stage VC exclusively for category defining Jerusalem tech startups. Now, you obviously have global reach with your book, but is your focus just in Jerusalem?
Yeah, I kind of accidentally became a VC. I wasn't intending to be a VC. I was broke and unemployed. And I was actually working on a startup idea. And without going into all the history of Israel's technology scene, most of it is in Tel Aviv, but almost all the investors are in Tel Aviv. And there was a period of time in Jerusalem where there were startups and there weren't too many startups. And when the ecosystem started up again, my thesis was that nobody was paying attention, and there was an opportunity to capture at lower valuation a couple exciting opportunities a year. That was the whole thing. It was just, I didn't create a venture capital fund because I wanted to be a venture capitalist. I created a venture capital fund because I wanted to solve a specific problem, which was lack of early stage capital in the capital in Jerusalem. So because it was accidental, because it was trying to solve a localized, very point in time, point in place problem, I felt I had no competitive advantage to expand my reach outside of the city. There were plenty of other investors in the other hubs. There weren't that many investors that were looking at my hub. So I thought I could try to capture that. And that's what happened. I was able to do that, 12 years ago, thankfully, and it worked out pretty well. But again, like you said, I want to have a broader reach outside of the ecosystem, helping other founders anywhere. And that's why I've done this work to put out materials for pitching that really can help anybody anywhere, wherever they may be. And that's my ability to have an impact outside of my localized ecosystem.
Yeah. Well, I love the work you're doing in a fantastic book, Fever Pitch. Pick it up, folks. It's very entertaining. It's not like any business book you have ever read. And I really thank you for being here, Ben. Where can people learn more about you and get all the details they need to build their H.E.A.R.T framework?
Thank you. I appreciate that. So the best place to find information about what we talked about is at feverpitchbook.com. That's where you can find information about the book. But like I said, you can also take a right turn and go straight into the free playbook and find the pitch generator. It's all there to be helpful and to be used. You can find out more about me at my author website at benwiener, WIENER.net. And you can contact me there if you have questions. Those are the best places. I'm on LinkedIn. That's my only social media presence. I've kind of shut down everything else because it was getting a little bit too toxic. But LinkedIn is healthy. Just if you do reach out on LinkedIn, just send a note that you heard me on the podcast, because I get too many things that I don't recognize. But again, the best places to go are feverpitchbook.com and benwiener, WIENER.net.
All right. I appreciate that. I'm going to leave with the purpose statement that the Genie created for you. It is, quote, Ben Wiener / Jumpspeed Ventures exists to help entrepreneurs build category-defining companies that solve meaningful problems and create lasting impact. Is that accurate?
That was great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben. Have a great day.
Thank you for having me.
Or evening in your case.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening, and check out Ben's H.E.A.R.T framework. It is super powerful. And of course, share the show with anyone you know who would benefit from Ben's wisdom. I hope you'll join me on our soft story cycle genie launch coming in early July. You can check it out and register at businessofstory.com/story cycle genie. Join me next Monday when SaaS pricing wizard Ben Belkowski shares his wisdom on pricing your product or service and learn how important storytelling is, given that all pricing is subjective. It's story that communicates your objective value. Until then, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is, objectively, the story you tell yourself. So make that one epic. Thanks so much for listening.